Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really complex argument that's been making the rounds online. It alleges a sort of hidden history behind one of the most prominent conservative voices in America today.
So the whole thing kicks off with this, well, it's a puzzle. A really stark contradiction from Tucker Carlson himself. On the one hand, in March of 2024, he says he was completely shocked to find out his father was involved with the CIA. But then you look back just to June of 2023, and he's saying, yeah, obviously my father worked in conjunction with CIA. Okay, so what gives? According to the source material for this explainer, this isn't just some simple slip-up or a misspeak. No, they argue it's actually a key, kind of like a thread, that when you pull on it starts to unravel this much bigger story. A story that goes back decades and involves a deliberate effort to shape the American right. All right, first up, the Buchanan parallel. Is there a pattern of gatekeeping? The argument here is that to really get what's happening now, we've got to rewind the clock about 25 years. Because according to the source, we've kind of seen this movie before with another really controversial figure, Pat Buchanan. So picture this, it's the 1990s. The first Gulf War is looming. And you've got this longtime conservative powerhouse, Pat Buchanan, who is dead set against it. And he was not shy about why, either. He famously said the only people who wanted that war were Israel and, as he put it, their Amen corner in Washington.
Now, as you can imagine, that statement caused a massive firestorm. Buchanan was pretty much immediately labeled an anti-Semite by a lot of people, and guess who was one of his loudest critics back then? A much younger Tucker Carlson. He basically argued that what Buchanan was doing, all that rhetoric, was damaging the entire conservative movement.
And this right here is what the source material calls a crucial moment of gatekeeping. See, the argument is that Carlson was drawing a line in the sand. He was defining the acceptable limits of debate. He was saying, look, it's okay to criticize the Israel lobby as a political thing, but you can't cross the line and link it to Jewish identity. And that distinction, that specific line, is supposedly the key to this whole thing.
Okay, so what's the ideology that's actually at the heart of all this? That brings us to our next section, the neoconservative origins, or a liberal mugged by reality. To get it, we've got to go back to the very beginning of neoconservatism.
So you've probably heard the famous definition, right? It's from Irving Kristol, who's basically known as the godfather of the whole movement. He said, a neoconservative is a liberal who has been mugged by reality. It's a great line, super memorable. But the source we're looking at asks a really important question. What exactly was that reality that did the mugging?
Well, the argument goes that the reality was the very real existential threat to Israel. Think about it. After the 1973 Yom Kippur War, which almost wiped Israel off the map, the political landscape shifted dramatically. The American left and the Soviet Union both turned hard against Israel. And for a group of really prominent Jewish leftist thinkers, this was a massive betrayal. So they changed. They converted to this much more hawkish pro-Israel ideology. That was the mugging.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. The source we're explaining makes a direct connection between this new intellectual movement and, believe it or not, the American intelligence community. Let's look at the CIA connection, an alliance forged in the Cold War. So the argument here is that from the very beginning, the CIA and its precursor, the OSS, had this symbiotic relationship, first with Jewish refugees during World War II and later with Israeli intelligence. Why? Well, they were seen as these incredible assets against common enemies, first the Nazis, then the Soviets. But this wasn't just about spies and covert ops. The source says it was also an intellectual alliance, with the CIA actually funding projects to fight the ideological war against communism.
And to really hammer this connection home, the source points to Irving Kristol himself. He was apparently right there at the founding of some of these CIA-backed groups, and his magazine even got funding from them. So not just a bystander, but an active participant.
Okay, so this alliance, it wasn't just a flash in the pan. The argument is that it grew into something much bigger, a multi-generational network built up over decades, from Buckley to Thiel to Vance.
And check out this timeline the source lays out. It's meant to show a direct line of influence. You start in the 50s with figures like William F. Buckley, who was recruited by the CIA at Yale. Then you move through the 70s and 80s with Kristol and the rise of neoconservatism, and then you see his institute giving seed money to student papers founded by guys like Peter Thiel. Fast forward to today, and that same Peter Thiel is now a huge CIA contractor and is funding the careers of politicians like J.D. Vance. It's quite a progression.
So yeah, this network was apparently built from the ground up, starting early. The source claims that Kristol's institute basically acted like a venture capital firm, but for ideology. They were handing out startup cash to a whole new generation of conservative voices at top-tier universities like the ones you see here.
And you know what?
That early investment paid off. Big time. According to the source, you have figures like Peter Thiel, who got his start with help from this network, now turning around and becoming kingmakers themselves, pouring millions into the political careers of their own protégés, like J.D. Vance.
And all of this brings us right to the heart of the source's modern-day critique. It's about what it calls a huge, fundamental contradiction in the new national conservatism movement. Let's talk about the real America first. One nationalism for Israel, another for America.
So the argument focuses on a guy named Yoram Hazony, who's a really key figure in this NatCon movement, and the source points out what it sees as a major contradiction. On one hand, for Israel, Hazony champions this really fierce, ethnic, blood and soil kind of nationalism. But for America, he completely rejects that same idea, saying his movement has a clear border with those kinds of groups. The source presents this as a core hypocrisy.
Okay, let's just pull all these threads together. Here's the argument in a nutshell. 1. The neocon movement was born out of fear for Israel's survival. 2. It was supported and intertwined with the CIA during the Cold War. 3. This alliance built a network over generations to influence conservative politics. And 4. That same network now acts as a gatekeeper, shutting down anyone who points out the ethnic and pro-Israel motivations at its core. So, what's the big takeaway? The source concludes that all the fighting you see on the American right, it's not a real ideological battle. It's a performance, a show, all designed to protect this decades-old project.
And that leaves us with the big, provocative question at the very heart of this entire explainer. Is the battle for the soul of the American right a genuine ideological war, or is it more like a staged performance between different factions that actually share the same hidden origins? What is the real fight for the future of conservatism? That is the question we're left with.